Hello there, and welcome to Play the Game with Steve. Villains Beyond, Episode 18, Ebony Maw. In this episode, we're going to take a look at Ebony Maw in his different stages. We're going to have a look at his signature kit and how they will punish our heroes. We're going to take a look at some of the little points of rules and all things that might be needing a little bit of a clarification. And then we're going to take a look at some of the modular sets that we can include to increase the thematics, the difficulty, or just the overall enjoyment of this scenario. All this and more on this episode of Villains Beyond, Ebony Maw. So Ebony Maw is a Black Order and Mystic traded on all three stages. He also has a Force Interrupt on all three, which says when Ebony Maw activates against you, that means when he attacks or schemes, will remove an invocation counter from each spell card in your play area. And then on stage 1, he has a scheme of 2, an attack of 1, 14 hit points per player. Stage 2, he'll have a scheme of 2, an attack of 2, and a 18 hit points per player, and a when revealed. When revealed will say each player discards card from the top of the encounter deck until they discard a spell card and puts that card into play into their play area. And on stage 3, he will have a scheme of 3, an attack of 2, 23 hit points per player, and the same when revealed, each player discards cards from the top until they discard a spell card and then puts that card into play in their play area. Now, a couple points of rules here. So activate. So if let's say Ebony Maw is stunned or confused, the Force Interrupt will not trigger because he will never activate because if it is a replacement effect. Secondly, if there are no spells in the encounter deck when you get Ebony Maw stage 2, then what will happen is you will get an acceleration token and then move on to the next player. If there's still none, there will be another acceleration and then so on and so forth for a 4-player game. There are 2 main schemes. The first one is called Attack on Nowhere. It just says here that you add 2 modular encounter sets. There is no setup. On stage 1B, it starts at 1 per player, accelerates by 1 per player, and it has a maximum 6 per player. It also has a when revealed, each player discards cards from the top of the encounter deck until a spell environment is discarded and put it into play in their play area. And then you shuffle the encounter deck, discard pile into the encounter deck, which means that when you are playing on Expert, you will do this one first, and then you will do Ebony Maw. So that's how that works. So you discard 4, and then you reshuffle everything, and then you do the main scheme. If you lose the main scheme, it is okay. The Power Stone 2A. When revealed, you'll shuffle the encounter deck and discard pile into the encounter deck. And then each player discards cards from the top of the encounter deck until a spell environment is discarded and puts it into play into their play area. So here the same reasoning. If there are no spell environments in the deck, you will get an acceleration per player for everyone that cannot trigger this when revealed. And then it will start at 1 per player, goes up by 1 per player, has a cap of 9 per player, and if this stage is completed, the players will lose the game. All right, on to the good stuff. His environment cards. All right, or invocation spells. They have the spell trait. They also have surge. That means that once they are revealed as an encounter card, they will surge, but when they are discarded and put into play, the surge will not resolve. All right, so manipulation is the first one. It enters play with 2 invocation counters on it and as a forced response. After the last invocation counter is removed from manipulation, you'll discard it. You discard 1 card at random from your hand, and then you are confused. So there's 2 copies of that. Then there's 2 copies of Rubble Storm. Again, has the surge keyword when revealed. Enters with the 3 invocation counters on it with the forced response. After the last invocation is removed, you'll deal 2 damage to each character you control. So that is allies. Even if you're an alter ego, anything in front of you that's an ally will take 2 damage. All right, the third one is Pacification. Again, 2 copies of this. Again, the surge keyword when revealed only. And then it'll enter with 3 invocation counters. The force response is after the last one is removed, you'll exhaust each upgrade you control, and then you are stunned. And then the final one, I'm a fireball. Bam, 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 down. All right, so the fireball, the last one, with, again, the surge keyword, if it is revealed, it will enter with 4 invocation counters on it. And then, because it's his big spell, right? And then force response, and after the last one is removed, you'll deal 4 damage to your identity. So this can be very, very devastating if that happens. So I really like here how they captured the flavor of the character. Ebony Maw is a mystic. He is doing all these spells and stuff like that. I do appreciate, even the surge doesn't really bother me here because these all have delayed effects. So I think it's good. You know, it just kind of shows how powerful he is. The invocation kind of resembles Doctor Strange's magic. So I really like that too. So how they really brought this character to life with these signature cards. Now let's take a look at some of the treacheries that we're going to interact with those environments. So the channeling trance. Now there's a little bit of a debate, and we'll get to that in a second about this one. So what does it do? Channeling trance says remove 1 invocation counter from each spell environment in your play area. But if you have no spell environments in your play area, discard cards from the top of the encounter deck until a spell environment is discarded. Put that card into play in your play area. So I strongly feel, and this is again up for debate, you can go in 2 ways. Let's say you have one counter left on, let's say, on Fireball, and you do Channeling Trance. You remove the last counter, boom, okay, it explodes. But then you have, if you continue reading, it says, well, if you have no spell environments. So I think this is a this or that moment. Thank you, Champs for Champs. Thanks, Talking Champs, for that little analogy here, that little reference. So I believe it says if you remove 1 from each of it. So that kind of just accelerate his thing for a turn. But if you have none, then if you've done this, you don't need to read the rest of the text. But if you didn't do the first part, then you move on to the second part of the text. So this is how I would interpret it, and this is how I have been interpreting it in the game. So if you think I'm wrong, you can always debate that. Because if you think you have to read the entire sentence, then because it says, it doesn't say then. If it had the word then, if they have no spell environments in play, then I would agree that you would have to go look for one. But that, for me, is just like, have you done this? Yes, you've resolved that treachery. That's what it does. If you haven't done that first part, then you move on to the next part. So that is how I interpret this when I play Ebony Maw. You are free to choose and debate this as much as you want. I'm good with it. All right, then we have Agent of Thanos. When revealed, if you are an alter ego, you'll place 1 threat on the main scheme for each spell in your play area. If you place no threat, this card will gain surge. So again, so you can see how the way this is worded, it's if you haven't put any, then that's what's going to happen. All right, so that card will gain surge. In hero form, you'll deal a damage to your hero for each spell. And same thing, if you took no damage, the card will gain surge. And again, it's very fitted. Okay, then he has a couple of attachments that are 1 to protect himself. He's got the Abjuration, will attach to Ebony Maw. It'll prevent all damage to Ebony Maw. So that is preventing all damage. So retaliate, all the little ping damage. But there is a force response. After Abjuration prevents 2 or more damage from a single attack. So it has to be from an attack. Then you discard it. And then the second one is Restrained. You attach to a friendly character with the highest attack, and then you exhaust that character. And then that character cannot ready. And then there's a hero action to spend a lightning and a physical resource to discard this card. Now, one thing that I would like to point out here is that that any player, the attachments are not obligations. So any player can spend these to free up your character. So in a multiplayer game, you would be allowed to have another player spend the 2 resources to discard this from your character. All right, it is not an obligation. Obligations must be resolved from your character. Any of the attachments that have negative effects, any player can resolve those. And then finally, he has a couple of side schemes called the Reactor Overload. They both have 3 and coming with a crisis icon. And then it says each player must choose to either take 2 damage or place 2 threat here. So again, depending on where you are in the game, you might want to take the damage if you can't deal with the threat, or if the threat on the main is very high, you might want to just take the damage, not to add threat on the crisis. So that is always up for debate. I like these cards that give you choices. For me, it makes the scenario more interesting and more interactive. All right, now for the meat and bones of why you are here is what modular sets could we include to switch it up a little bit instead of the recommended modular sets. Now, Ebony Maw is interesting because it does ask for 2 modular sets, so that's always interesting to kind of play around with. There's 2. So my first recommendation thematically would be kind of referencing the movie with the Chaos in City and Chaos modular set. So this one obviously has the panic in the streets, and we saw that happening at the start of the movie in Infinity War. Bang, everyone's panicking in the streets, and then Ebony Maw arrives and rejoice. Obviously, Rhino has nothing to do, so we kick out Rhino, and then we praise Rhino with the Black Dwarf instead from the Black Order. And if he gets calling in favors, and then you go get Black Dwarf instead. So it's like a little thematics callback here. And then the Now or Nevers that has the little peril, and you can spend and exhaust characters, which I thought was good and kind of felt thematic to the movie. In complement to this one, adding the state of emergency to the mix, I thought was a very good idea. Again, Hot Pursuit. I just get a callback to the movie where Spider-Man and then they're fighting Black Dwarf, and then Ebony Maw's trying to escape with Doctor Strange. So I thought that fit in thematically to what we need to do. The fire heist, not so much, but the Inferno, like just the city burning all around them, and then the disaster. They're not at the docks, they're at the park, but you can still kind of play around thematically to make it work. And then obviously with the 2 city-wide crises, just makes a whole bunch of effects that kind of trigger off each other. And I think this is a very good modular combination together. Just panic, and it just recreates the theme of what we are seeing in the first Avengers movie there, the Infinity Glove. So that is my first recommendation for thematics. All right, so if you're looking for ways to increase the difficulty, it's not too complicated. There's a lot of things that you can add, and I think the best way to switch it up is to just remove Armies of Titan and Black Order and just add some more powerful minions in the encounter deck. So here's a couple of suggestions that I liked. Obviously, there's tons of combinations that you can do. Here's just some that I'm just putting thematically as well that fit together, which is kind of fun because, again, you could think that Ebony Maw is just manipulating and controlling everyone with his sorcerer power. So Hydra Assault and Legions of Hydra together. I think this is pretty fun. Again, adds a very good challenge because of the guards. And then the Jet Troopers as a boost card will also give him extra activations, which will also increase the challenge. The Acolytes and Exodus is another great team up here. All of the Acolytes kind of trigger and kind of give boost effects to the villain. And then Exodus also has a lot of cards that synergize well with the Acolytes. So for me, I think it's a very good combination of characters. And if you like the X-Men's, well, why not add Mystique and the Brotherhood? Again, 2 really good modulars that really complement each other very, very well. If you're into all the X-Men stuff and you kind of want to add them to the different scenarios, I think these 2 modulars work really, really well together as well. If you like the pain, add Lady Deathstrike and the Reavers together with Ebony Maw. Again, you are in for a world of pain. These Reavers are no joke, and then adding Deathstrike that doesn't really trigger too much off of them, but she is a Reaver, so they kind of fit together. So I really enjoy these two together. I've played them a couple times, and my gosh, man, those Reavers are no joke when they start popping off. And then there's more, obviously more thematics that you can go off the hood modular packs. There's the Sinister Syndicate that you can combine well with Crossfire's crew. That all these these minions with these nice little boost effects. I think they're pretty fun. Modular set as well. They all have these little quirks. I'm not going to revise all of them. And then my last recommendation, if you really want to punish yourself, just add the Sinister Assault if you're playing a Spider-Man character. The Sinister Sorrow and the Sinister Six, Iron Spider's Sinister Six. Just adds a lot of flavor and difficulty to Ebony Maw if you're playing one of the spider characters. Like, oh no, I'm in space and these guys are still coming after us. So I think those again. And then there's more, like there's Sentinels, and then you could add there's who else? The Inheritors, and then there's all these other ones that you could add. If you want to flavor them up. And so just look at some of the modular sets that kind of go really well together, that kind of feed off of each other. So there's all these different ways to increase the difficulty for Ebony Maw. Adding the Ice Giants with the Legions of Hell is another one, or the Enchantress with the Ice Giants. So give it a little Asgard theme as well. So there's a lot of ways to modulate this scenario to give it a lot of challenge. All right, and then finally we're gonna go for the lulz. Brothers Grimm, like again, why wouldn't you? So the Brothers Grimm are actually mystics as well, so I think they fit kind of well with the Ebony Maw play. And then obviously all the 4 attachments that come in, they attach to the Brothers Grimm, and if he's not there, they attach to the villain. They give extra encounter cards, and they have all these little nasty synergies as well that work well. So I thought that was a very good for the lulz moment. What if Ebony Maw had some mystical pals? But I think my best part is kind of like bringing it back to the MCU and combining the Brothers Grimm with the temporal. What if he had captured the Time Stone from Doctor Strange when he was on the ship, and then he opens a time portal, and then he gets the dinosaur and the ancient warriors and the soldiers. So there you go. I thought that was a fun lulz moment when I played the game with those 2 modular sets. I thought it was fun. It was fun. It was like, oh no, he's taken the stone from Stephen Strange, and I'm like, oh no, now look at all this bad stuff that's happening. So for me, this was probably one of the funner games here, pairing those modulars together. And then finally, I was like, oh well, what if Ebony Maw took a page out of Tony Stark's book and decided to go add technology to his magic? And then for the lulz, what about the Goblin Gear? Now that Goblin Gear has a lot of tech attachments. And then they all gain surge, and then obviously the remote navigation, giving him double activation, which is just brutal. That's really going to burn through those invocation counters, and then again all the other little attachments with extra negative effects. But that's not all. So if you really don't like yourself and you really want to give it the extra effort for difficulty, add the Osborne tech to that, and then you're in for a world of pain. It's been a while since I recommended these modulars, but I think with Ebony Maw it does fit. The surging just gets a little out of hand sometimes. In the 2 games I played, I got destroyed the first time, but it was still a gap, but it was in solo. But adding this to a multiplayer game, I think it's not as bad, and it would still be a lot more fun in a multiplayer setting. But Ebony Maw with all these techs, it is pretty fun. All right, so that is it for the recommended modular sets. Now let's take a look at some of the best cards to include when you are building your decks to fight off against Ebony Maw. Like any villain that derives from activations bonuses, being able to remove those activations is probably going to be your best bet to really take down this villain in an efficient manner. So cards like Dropkick and Psylocke for aggression are very good. Again, there's a little bit of a kicker cost, but being able to stun an enemy or confuse an enemy in aggression, definitely your winning cards for this scenario. In protection, there's a lot better. There's like Never Back Down. Since his attack is at 1 or a 2, most likely if you're playing a protection hero, you'll be able to use this Never Back Down and be able to stun the enemy. So a perfect defense strategy against him is very, very viable. Also Hard Knocks if you're deciding to include the minions, or the Tackle if you are playing one of the different modulars with not a lot of minions. Still very efficient to be able to stun and deal some damage. And again, we have our MVP for stunning with Iron Fist, which is 2 stuns and a block. So that guy is definitely the best bang for your buck if you want to include him in your protection build. Injustice, again, being able to confuse is a very good way, but I also highly recommend Crisis Averted because there is a couple of crisis icons in his scheme, in his kit, and that might just be the end of you if you don't take care of them. So having a Crisis Averted in your deck is going to help prevent that little loss. Obviously, Under Surveillance is a great option, bringing his first scheme from 6 to 10, or the other one from 9 to 13 in solo play is going to be huge and is very going to be to your advantage if you're playing a Justice build. And then adding Sonic Rifle or a Dazzler, so we have 3 options to be able to confuse, which means you're going to have all the tempo you need to build up strong and then finish off Ebony Maw fast and quick. And then finally, in leadership, Captain Marvel, again, you need to build with lightning resources for this card to be efficient. But when she comes in, can deal some damage and stun, and also she attacks for 3 or thwarts for 2. So that is very, very solid for the leadership build. Unfortunately, it's the only card that works. And then in basics, well, the 2 best friends here is Mockingbird and Professor X, both having a cool enter the battlefield effect, which can stun and confuse, which can leave an Ebony Maw lost in the winds. And that is it, guys, for these recommendations for the different cards in the different aspects. I hope you enjoyed Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw, I feel, is a very good villain for the Mad Shatten's title box. He makes sense. His spells are fun. When they start hitting, if you get 2 or 3 in a row, you're like, oh my god, he's just going off the chains. But for me, it is always enjoyable playing against Ebony Maw. And finally, big congratulations to Tyler Eberl and Real Milton Bradley. You guys are the winners of the comments. You guys got selected at random. So you guys each earn yourselves some OP Mutant Genesis cards. So please send me a private message. And then you can, and then we'll coordinate that when I go to the Con of Heroes in May. And I'll send those out unless you're in Canada, and then I'll send those out earlier. But yeah, on that note, so guys, if you want your chance to win some of these OP cards, I still have a bunch left. So if you want some of the villain cards or some of the hero cards, just make sure you write a comment on this video, and then on the next video, it will be announced the winners. I always choose 2 winners at random that post comments. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed the Ebony Maw video, and I hope you guys keep on playing Marvel Champions, have some fun, and play the game. Bye-bye.